Well, as we have all week, we'll get to the news in a moment. All the fallout from the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel, apparently, according to the left, a significantly more important event in American life than the murder of Charlie Kirk. Truly, like the wailing, the gnashing of teeth, the sackcloth and ashes donned by every member of the entertainment coterie in the United States, people who are the richest and most famous among us, spending all their days talking about how this is the death of the republic. They did not demonstrate one iota of the same concern about, actual murder for free speech as they are about Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air in sort of disputed circumstance. We'll get to that. But I want to lead the whole week with inspirational news about Charlie and about TPUSA. So, according to the Daily Wire, Erica Kirk was elected by unanimous vote on Thursday to take over her late husband's role as CEO and board chair of the college campus organization he founded, Turning Point USA. This, of course, is exactly the right move. Exactly the right move. According to the Turning Point board, quote, in Ecclesiastes, King Solomon wrote that mankind is to be tested by God. Today, we are facing such a test, yet we also know that God has prepared us with everything we need to overcome this ordeal. It was the honor of our lives to serve as board members at Charlie's side. Charlie prepared all of us for a moment like this one. He worked tirelessly to ensure Turning Point USA was built to survive even the greatest tests, and now it is our great pride to announce Erica Kirk as the new CEO and chair of the board for Turning Point USA. All of us at Turning Point USA have a special role in carrying Charlie Kirk's mantle and completing his vision of bringing us all closer to our Lord and fostering a prosperous country for generations to come. As Charlie always said, we have a country to save. We will not surrender or kneel before evil. We will carry on. The attempt to destroy Charlie's work will become our chance to make it more powerful and enduring than ever before. May God bless Erica, the Kirk family, and the entire team at Turning Point USA. That was written by TPUSA board members Doug DeGroot, Mike Miller, Tom Sadeka, and Dave Engelhardt. It's exactly the right move. It's exactly the right move. Erica, of course, is a public figure in her own right. She has run businesses. She has an excellent educational background. She, of course, was involved with Charlie. Charlie, of course, was the driving force behind Turning Point USA. But it's not as though his wife was not involved or unaligned or something. She was very politically active. In fact, here is a clip of Charlie with Erica on his show just a few months ago.
My wife joins us, Erica Kirk,
Hi,
the beautiful,
everyone.
legendary Erica.
I love you so much.
I love you.
You're my best friend.
Welcome to the Charlie Kirk Show. We have asked the audience for questions. You pick one.
Who is more conservative and why?
Erica,
Yes.
by far. Not even close. I am a moderate compared to Erica.
Andrew always jokes that once you got married to me, you got more based.
That's true. That is true. No, Erica is very conservative. Do you
So-
think having kids made you more conservative?
100%. Which I didn't think was possible.
So, Erica will be taking over as the head of the organization, which, of course, is precisely exactly the right move. Erica is not only a delightful human being, she also happens to be made in Charlie's mold. She is a fighter, and that is great for TPUSA. Couldn't be more excited about that. And obviously, we at Daily Wire will continue to help TPUSA the best we can. Meanwhile, Speaker Johnson is urging a unanimous resolution for a day honoring Charlie Kirk, scheduled for his birthday, October 14th.
In moments like this, when political instability and fear are pervasive, it's incumbent upon leaders to step forward and stand in the breach and do what is right. And so by voting for this resolution today, we're making a strong statement on behalf of the Congress. We're telling our constituents, for one thing, that political violence, but also the glorification and celebration of that violence, are profoundly wrong, and that goes against everything we stand for as Americans. Charlie stood for exactly the opposite. He stood for what was good in America, what is virtuous, what is worthy of protection and preservation. And we honor his memory by doing this simple act of passing this resolution. I can't imagine that anyone would vote against it or vote present or pretend as though this is not exactly the right thing to do. So I certainly hope that we can pass this resolution unanimously today, just as it should be passed.
Okay, so again, all of this beautiful tribute to Charlie. His memorial is to take place on Sunday in Arizona. It's going to be taking place at the football stadium in Phoenix. And we're talking like 65,000 people there. Now, what I've heard from the folks over at TPUSA is that the reservations were numbering over 250,000. And that was a couple of days ago, as far as people who wanted to get in. I mean, again, the outpouring of love for Charlie is an amazing, amazing thing. And that's the thing that I think that most Americans should be focused on. They should be focused on the good that Charlie did and the good that TPUSA, the organization that he built, will continue to do under Erica's leadership. Joining us on the line is our White House reporter, Mary Margaret Olahan. Mary Margaret is going to be going to Charlie Kirk's funeral on Sunday aboard Air Force One with the President of the United States. Mary Margaret, thanks for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Ben, it's great to be here.
So obviously it's been an incredibly tough week for an enormous number of people. What's the attitude around the White House given the horrifying murder of our friend Charlie Kirk?
Well, Ben, it has been an incredibly sad week, and I think still here at the White House, if you ask any of these officials or members of the communications team how they're doing, how things are, people respond, not great. Charlie was a friend and colleague and even a mentor to many of these people who work here. And so it's been incredibly crushing to see how he was killed and to, I think, experience the aftermath of a lot of this aggressively violent rhetoric directed towards a lot of members of the Trump administration. We heard only this morning, it was reported by CBS News that Caroline Leavitt now has a security detail. Now, I asked the White House about this. They didn't comment further on it. But what I can tell you is I have a federal law enforcement source that told me you don't get a security detail unless there's a reason for it, unless there was a threat assessment done to show that you need one. And that source also told me that there's a lot of members across the Trump administration, whether they're in higher level positions or mid-level positions, lower level positions that are receiving threats as well. And whether those threats are substantiated, it doesn't really matter. They're receiving them all across the board. And this is really creating a culture of fear among a lot of people. That being said, these members of the Trump administration are still determined to go to this funeral. They're still going to show their support for their deceased friend. And we're seeing across the board a lot of examinations of how safe this event will be. Obviously, President Donald Trump will be going. Vice President J.D. Vance will be going. Ben, I know that you'll be in attendance, and I will as well. And so this is a very serious event, and I'm glad that they're taking security so seriously. And it's a really sad time, but it will be beautiful for everyone to be gathered in Arizona together and to honor Charlie's memory.
So, Mary Margaret, obviously we've seen some of the public reports. I've talked to some of the people at TPUSA itself about what the event is going to look like. What are you hearing from the White House's perspective about what people can expect on Sunday?
Yes, so I know that Charlie's widow, Erica Kirk, is scheduled to speak at the funeral event. This is going to be a massive public funeral. I believe the President of the United States is scheduled to speak as well as J.D. Vance and other members of the Trump administration and conservative hosts or commentators who were close with Charlie to honor his memory. I'll be flying in with the president and other reporters, members of the White House press pool on Sunday. And this is a massive event. I'm seeing TPUSA commentators like my friend Alex Clark. She's urging as many people as possible to go to this event. The dress code is red, white, and blue. Sunday best, but red, white, and blue. And Alex, as I saw her encouraging online, she said, even if you can't get into the event, even if it's completely full, I want you in the streets. I want everyone in red, white, and blue. I want this to be bigger than a Taylor Swift concert, bigger than the Super Bowl. And so you're seeing a lot of emotion like this, support from people who worked with him, who were close with him, to encourage as many people as possible to come out and honor his memory. And I hope we do see that. I hope that we see the stadium packed for Charlie and that security is tight and that everyone can honor his memory as the great man who he was.
Well, it's Mary Margaret Olahan, our White House reporter. Mary Margaret, really appreciate it. And obviously, I'll see you on Sunday to celebrate the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk.
Looking forward to it, Ben.
Okay, meanwhile, the entire media are filled with rage and anguish today, not over Charlie's murder. I mean, let's be real. There are many who are not of my political ilk who were very broken up over Charlie's murder. I got calls from them, emails, texts. I know who they are. And honestly, obviously, I feel the exact same way. There are many on the left who did not feel the exact same way. There are many on the left who felt like, just another day in America, or it's just a gun violence act, or even, he did have some views I don't particularly like. With that said, the outpouring for Jimmy Kimmel is overwhelming. Overwhelming. So let's start from the things that we know about Jimmy Kimmel going off the air. Number one, Jimmy Kimmel's ratings were lower than dog bleep. Jimmy Kimmel had horrifyingly low ratings, like truly awful ratings. Remember, He was on network television, network TV. He was drawing in 2025 1.6 million people viewing his show, being broadcast for free on network TV across the country. In the advertiser-coveted demographic of adults aged 25 to 54, the decline was even more significant. Okay, you ready for this? Adults aged 25 to 54. What were his views? In 2015, he had 1 million viewers in that age range. By 2025, he had, I kid you not, 261,000 people in that age range, 25 to 54, watching his show. My show is multiple times larger than Jimmy Kimmel's show by this metric. Like by a multiple. The ABC late night program showed a staggering 72% of the audience that helps pays the bill over the last decade. Compare that to Gutfeld over on Fox. In 2025, Gutfeld averaged 3.2 million total viewers, despite the fact that it's on a cable channel. It is not network. Okay, meanwhile, when it came to that 25 to 54 demographic, Gutfeld was averaging 381,000 people compared to 261,000 for Kimmel, meaning that Gutfeld was ahead of him by 46%. So it is quite possible, frankly, that a bunch of local affiliates were just done, that they were just done with Jimmy Kimmel. And when Jimmy Kimmel decided that he was going to go on air and heavily suggest that the shooter of Charlie Kirk was in fact a MAGA conservative, that they'd had it. Many of these station owners, remember the way that this works is that many of the local stations are not owned directly by ABC. They are owned by local television networks or by consortiums like Sinclair. So Sinclair Broadcasting happens to be conservative in its orientation politically. The ownership of Sinclair is conservative. There's been long-time rumors of Sinclair trying to launch its own form of Fox News, essentially, with its own lineup and all the rest. So it is perfectly plausible that Sinclair looked at what Jimmy Kimmel said and they said, you know what, we're done. We're not interested anymore. In fact, Sinclair said that his suspension by ABC was insufficient. What happened is the local affiliates went to ABC. They said, we don't want him on the air. And ABC responded by basically saying, well, I mean, if like half of our affiliates don't want you on the air, we're just going to suspend your show because what else are we going to do? We have to provide them some programming. Well, Sinclair announced it would yank Jimmy Kimmel Live from its stations until the host apologized directly to Charlie Kirk's family and also donated to TPUSA, which of course is not going to happen. The company vowed not to return Kimmel's show until formal discussions are held with ABC regarding the network's commitment to professionalism and accountability. Meanwhile, Nexstar, they were the biggest network to say that they were not interested, the network of affiliates, to say they weren't interested in Jimmy Kimmel. When this happened, apparently, Jimmy Kimmel had been planning to double down on his remarks. Like the reason he was pulled abruptly is because he was planning the night after that show on doing another monologue where he ripped into MAGA. According to the New York Post, late night host Jimmy Kimmel said he was unwilling to apologize for his remarks that blamed MAGA supporters for killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk. He said he was going to double down on attacking President Trump's backers before he was yanked from the air, according to new reports. Kimmel learned in a phone call from top Disney exec Dana Walden on Wednesday afternoon that his show was being removed indefinitely, according to Deadline. During that call, Kimmel reportedly refused to comply with calls from critics and owners of dozens of ABC affiliate stations for him to apologize. Kimmel felt his remarks required no apologies. Apparently, he also claimed he was planning to call out his critics for the latest attacks on him, all while trying to clarify his comments about Kirk's death. He says that his comments were mischaracterized. Disney felt that if Kimmel had doubled down on his MAGA comments, the company would have been forced to go beyond suspending him and they would just have to fire him. It's still unclear if he's willing to return after this suspension at all. All right, in a moment, we will get to Jimmy Kimmel, why he was actually fired. He was planning to double down. Plus, we will get to the FCC. Are they involved in overregulation? Is there going to be a crackdown on quote-unquote hate speech? What the hell is going on? First, everyone says AI will make the world better. The question is better for whom? I mean, better for some people, not as good for others, because the truth is that AI is living off your data. I mean, that's what it does. AI takes data and then it churns out its predictive text mechanisms. And so that means that it needs more data, like your data. And that's why I protect myself with ExpressVPN, and you probably should as well. ExpressVPN encrypts all your online activity and routes it through secure servers so no one can see what you're doing online. Not your internet provider, not data brokers, not AI systems. Your browsing history simply doesn't exist for anyone to use against you later. It's dead simple to use. It works on any device that connects to the internet, phones, laptops, tablets, you name it. It's fast enough, you won't even notice it's running while you stream, game, or browse. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk. That's why tech experts at CNET and The Verge consistently rate ExpressVPN as the #1 VPN. I'm all over the place these days. A lot of travel, a lot going on, connecting to public Wi-Fi. My data is my business, and so I use ExpressVPN. Use my special link to get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN's privacy protection for free. Head on over to expressvpn.com/Ben. That's expressvpn.com/Ben to get 4 extra months for free. Also, I love movies about real heroes who have the courage to stand up against evil. We need those stories today. That's exactly why the incredible story told in Bao, Artist at War, caught my attention. The film opens September 26th. You can visit baomovie.com to see the trailers. Bao, Artist at War tells the remarkable true story of Joseph Bao, a gifted artist and forger who risked his life to save others during the Holocaust. There he found not only the strength to survive, but unexpected love with Rebecca. It's a gripping story of survival, love, and courage. The movie is great. It stayed with me. Not just another Holocaust film. It's a film about how art and love can save lives, literally and spiritually. Joseph Bao was a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp, forging documents to help others escape. He was also a poet, an animator, and a romantic. His story, his love, his resilience, feels like fiction, but it's actually real. If you love Schindler's List or Jojo Rabbit, films that show not just what was lost, but what was fought for, you should see Bao. Bao, Artist at War. It opens only in theaters for a limited run beginning September 26th. Go to baomovie.com to watch the trailer, read about Joseph's real-life journey, and find showtimes near you. Again, that's BAUmovie.com, baomovie.com. Okay, so just from that fact pattern, it appears that the reason that Kimmel was taken off the air is because of organic outrage by viewers, which filtered up to affiliates, and those affiliates went to Disney and ABC, and they said, we are not interested in having Jimmy Kimmel on our air. And he responded by saying, I'm going to double down and attack your viewers. So, as a matter of sort of organic market blowback to crap programming, totally legit. And in fact, not unprecedented in any way, shape, or form. This has happened many times before. Many, many times before. It happened most prominently, actually, right after September 11th, when Bill Maher was suspended from the air, because Bill Maher made some comments about 9/11 that people didn't like. And then, of course, he found his new home over on HBO. What muddies the waters here are the words of the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr. Because Brendan Carr went on Benny Johnson and suggested, right before the affiliates apparently went to Disney and ABC, that there might be regulation, there might be punishment for affiliates for putting out the Jimmy Kimmel Show. And that raised the specter of government involvement. As I said yesterday, as an organic matter, Jimmy Kimmel should have been kicked off the air 10 years ago. He's an awful, awful late-night host. He decided not to be funny. He decided that instead of going for laughter, he was going to go for clapter. Meaning like, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. He decided he was going to go for that a decade ago. And he should have been basically booted for being bad at his job a long time ago. So I shed no tears for Jimmy Kimmel. With that said, the FCC should not be in the business of telling local affiliates what they should and should not broadcast. So why don't we begin this discussion about what the FCC can and should do by finding out what exactly they have the legal power to do. So I asked my sponsors over at Comet, a browser by Perplexity, what powers does the FCC have to regulate actual content over the airwaves? And according to Comet, the FCC's powers to regulate actual content over the airwaves are significantly limited by the First Amendment. It does have authority in certain areas, specifically regarding obscenity, indecency, and profanity, as well as public interest and disclosure requirements for broadcasters. The FCC is strictly limited in censoring broadcast material and cannot impose content-based restrictions that would curb specific viewpoints. There are some exemptions there. Public interest requirements are about broadcast licenses. They're awarded based on whether stations, quote, serve the public interest, convenience, and necessity, which is interpreted to include equal opportunities for political candidates, disclosure of sponsorship for political or commercial content, prohibition of lottery advertising, and rules against broadcast news distortion if it involves deliberate manipulation of significant facts. So the case that Brendan Carr would make is that basically Jimmy Kimmel was deliberately manipulating significant facts, and so the FCC can go after him. The problem, of course, is that the thing that we have learned here over and over and over again is that if a left-wing person is at the head of the FCC, they will simply accuse the right wing of deliberate manipulation of significant facts. And so what's good for the goose is good for the gander here, which is why the actual solution here would be to remove that capacity from the FCC. How about that? Can we get any support for that? Will Republicans, will Democrats, will anyone support that? Here's the beautiful thing about a government of enumerated powers. A government of enumerated powers is a government you don't have to fear as much, because if you're on the wrong side of the government still can't do anything to you because it has enumerated powers. So if you reduce the power of government in this area entirely, that seems to me a better solution than a race to the bottom where every prior norm gets broken. And I fully understand the mutually assured destruction argument. I've used it myself before. But I think that what we're getting into now is not mutually assured destruction, but assumption that the next go around, they will destroy you, so you should just destroy them preemptively. And if that happens, then basically there's no reason for anybody to go weapons down. Again, it all remains unclear as to why this actually happened. There's a long account in the Wall Street Journal about how this happened. The timeline goes like this. Kimmel criticized how Trump and other Republicans responded to the shooting and suggested the shooter was, in fact, a MAGA Republican. Brendan Carr suggested during a podcast appearance 2 days later, the FCC could take action against the broadcast licenses of ABC-owned stations. Advertisers and affiliates soon called the network expressing concern about Kimmel's show. Executives at Sinclair and Nexstar, owners of more than 60 local ABC stations, told network leaders after Carr's remarks they would indefinitely preempt the show starting that night, moves that would hobble the program's reach. So, again, how much was the FCC part of this conversation? Is the big question. Nexstar is currently being regulated by the FCC. They need the FCC sign-off on their $6.2 billion acquisition of Tegna. And it needs the agency to ease rules that currently limit the percentage a broadcaster can reach to 39% of the nation's TV households. Now, Nexstar put out a statement. They said it had nothing to do with the government. Quote, the decision to preempt Jimmy Kimmel Live was made unilaterally by the senior executive team at Nexstar. They had no communication with the FCC or any government agency prior to making that decision. Apparently, ABC scrambled to satisfy advertisers who paid for commercials to run on episodes that were canceled. Advertising buyers said they would likely shift ad dollars committed to Kimmel's show to other programs. Some considered asking for their money back. So the question remains as to whether this was a reaction to Kimmel being bad at his job and saying bad things, or whether, in fact, this was a reaction to the FCC. And that's the open question at this point. FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez, she said, listen, we actually do not have the authority to retaliate against broadcasters, and so talk of us doing this is sloppy.
The thing that we need to understand is that the FCC cannot, it does not have the authority, it does not have the ability, it does not have the constitutional right to take action against broadcasters because the administration doesn't like what they're saying, because they don't like anyone that pushes back against them. Mm-hmm. So what you see are just threats, but the threats are the point. Because we don't have the authority to do this, because it's against the law, we would not be able to actually take that final action, because on appeal, the FCC would be wrong on the facts and the law if, in fact, it retaliated against the networks, the broadcasters, the local licensees, because of what they air.
Okay, that doesn't change the math, meaning that, yes, the FCC probably could not do what Brendan Carr had sort of suggested. However, if you're Nexstar, this is just to steel man the opposing case. If you're Nexstar and you're under the possibility of merger and you want to make sure that the merger doesn't get shut down, you want to please the FCC. And the way to please the FCC is to do the FCC's bidding. Now, again, it seems to me that there's a perfectly good organic case for canceling Jimmy Kimmel's show or suspending Jimmy Kimmel's show based on ratings, based on the fact that he says schmucky things all the time, based on the fact that he's bad at his job. And that's a point that the FCC's Brendan Carr made. He said Kimmel was losing viewers faster than Carr, who is bald, loses hair.
I think the last couple of decades, you've seen the FCC really step back from enforcing the public interest standard, and I don't think that that's a good thing. Just look at the trust in national mainstream media. It's just in an absolute nosedive. And look at the ratings for people like Jimmy Kimmel. They are going away, their audience and their viewers, faster than my hair's gone away from the top of my head.
So, again, that's fine. But when he says that he is going to go after others, now you start to build a narrative just politically. There's two questions here. Should the FCC get involved in this way? And even if the FCC is not involved in this way, should they be promulgating a narrative that can be used by the left to make the claim that the Trump administration is acting irresponsibly or in an authoritarian manner with regard to speech? If the narrative takeaway from the murder of Charlie Kirk turns from there is a systemic left-wing threat embedded in actual ideologies, a violent threat that emerges from the sewers of certain ideologies, and that needs to be fought both socially and insofar as it is possible with governmental power. If it shifts from that narrative to the Trump administration is trying to shut down The View, that is a giant fail. It is a giant fail. It is a counterproductive measure. Because the sympathy for Charlie is nationwide. Again, there's widespread sympathy for Charlie, obviously, for his family, and there should be. And there's widespread outrage at the attack on free speech it represents when somebody gets shot for debating. If somehow that narrative is turned into a narrative about the Trump administration actually shutting down free speech, that's a fail. That's a fail. It's a fail for the country. It's a fail for the administration. It is a bad way of approaching policy. Many things can be true at once. Jimmy Kimmel is terrible and should be off the air. Charlie Kirk was a warrior for free speech who was shot. That is significantly worse than Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air. Also, the FCC should not be threatening various broadcasters and hosts with governmental consequences for speech. And they shouldn't even appear to be doing that. Even if that's not the reason why people are acting, it muddies the waters. Again, there's an easy way to tell whether you're being ideologically coherent on this. If the shoe were on the other foot, if a left-wing politician had been shot or a left-wing activist had been shot by somebody associated with the right, and Barack Obama were president or Joe Biden were president, and they had activated their FCC to go after local Fox affiliates, for example, to go after talk radio, which is also public airwaves, would the right sit back and say, well, you know, this is why the solution to lack of trust between the right and the left is not the use of government to effectuate more power in general. The solution to that lack of trust is for the government to step back and effectuate less power. I don't mean in the criminal law. The Trump administration going after Antifa, going after the people who fund Antifa, going after the people who fund various violent groups around, that is only good, that is necessary. It is mandatory. But this narrative that the left is starting to spin up is bad. Now, again, the left is overdoing it on its own, right? So many things being true at once, as we'll get to, the left has decided that this is the greatest assault on American free speech in American history, which is totally crazy considering a man was shot to death for doing free speech 1 week ago. And they seem to care much more about Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air than Charlie Kirk being murdered live on TV. But we'll get to that in a moment. Here's the FCC's Brendan Carr saying that they will hold broadcasters accountable to the public interest.
Look, we're going to continue to hold these broadcasters accountable to the public interest. And if broadcasters don't like that, simple solution, they can turn their license into the FCC. There's other things that we can do with it that would serve the national interest. And frankly, other people would want to use this spectrum. But we're going to continue to make clear that we're holding broadcasters accountable to the public interest. And again, I think that's going to be a really good thing for the country. Again, people can go on podcasts and go on cable shows like this. You don't have a license from the FCC, so there's a lot more they can do there. There's no public interest obligation on those outlets.
Okay, again, the idea here should be that we should just deregulate. The FCC actually should not have the power to do local broadcast licenses, to regulate speech on those broadcasters. They shouldn't. It was one thing to say that, by the way, before the era of the internet, when basically you had a limited spectrum and the only things that got on TV were those local stations. I'd make the case we should have deregulated long before that. But this is a vestigial organ of a broadcast television infrastructure that no longer applies to the general informational consumption of the American people. But the reason that, again, I'm objecting to this is because the narrative that you're laying out for the left, and the narrative you're laying out for the left, or providing the impetus to, is the narrative that the Trump administration is anti-free speech in the aftermath of the murder of a free speech martyr. To blow that opportunity is a giant fail. The FCC's Brendan Carr, he said yesterday that maybe he would go after The View. Now, listen, there is no one in America who would be happier to watch The View go off the air than I. The View is a bunch of shrieking harpies who are unbelievably stupid, vicious, venal, annoying, harridans, jabbering at each other nonsensically to the clapter of trained seals in the audience. It is the worst show on TV. That is my review. If I were a regulator, would I be saying The View needs to go off the air because of violation of equal time rules? I really don't think we want to play this game. I really don't. It was equal time rules, by the way, that restricted back in the 1980s the ability of Republicans to get out their messages via the airwaves. Now, here is Brendan Carr with Scott Jennings talking about this.
You can make the argument that The View is a bona fide news show, but I'm not so sure about that. And I think it's worthwhile to have the FCC look into whether The View and some of these other programs that you have still qualify as bona fide news programs and therefore exempt from the equal opportunity regime that Congress has put in place.
Okay, well, I mean, why are you just giving the talking point to the other side? Why? Well, Charlie Kirk gets murdered. Now they've taken Kimmel off the air. Now they're taking The View off the air. And will you be next? And President Trump, unfortunately, threw some gasoline on the fire yesterday. So he said one true thing. He went off on Jimmy Kimmel, said he's a terrible host. He went scorched earth on him. Agree with every word from the President of the United States here.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else. And he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
Okay, that totally agree with that. And again, if that should be the story, right? The story should be Jimmy Kimmel gets fired because he's bad at his job and nobody wants him on there. Yay. Right? But instead, we're now going to have a conversation about hate speech, which, again, Republicans have opposed that idea for my entire lifetime because it is malleable. Yes, of course, there is some speech that is more hateful than other speech, but that is a malleable definition that can be applied to everything. The left was trying to say that's what Charlie was doing, was hate speech, and regulate it out of existence. So here's President Trump saying that maybe Brennan Carr will go after others. Again, why? Just why? Here was the president.
If they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. It will be up to Brendan Carr. I think Brendan Carr is outstanding. He's a patriot. He loves our country, and he's a tough guy. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, President Trump was then on with Martha McCallum. This is an interview that's supposed to be broadcast on Sunday. And in one of the clips released from the interview, he started talking about hate speech. And Martha McCallum made the quite proper point that Charlie Kirk didn't believe in the concept of hate speech because, my entire lifetime, the right has not believed in the concept of hate speech, given, again, that hate speech is a malleable term that can be applied to anything you don't like. And the president, instead of recognizing that point, then said, well, maybe Charlie would have changed his mind given what happened to him. Well, no, he would not have. No, he would not have. Because the person who shot him was claiming that Charlie was quote unquote hateful. The very concept of hate speech is a dangerous concept because it assumes that any speech I don't like can be labeled hate and therefore regulated out of existence. The president of the United States sat down with Martha McCallum over at Fox News and she asked him about hate speech.
Charlie said, that there was no such thing as hate speech. He obviously, no one anticipated what happened to Charlie, but you have always been. Now.
That's the president of the United States saying he might not believe that, anymore. Here's my problem. Like a couple of days ago, the president of the United States brought the topic of hate speech came up because Pam Bondi, the attorney general, idiotically suggested that she was going to prosecute hate speech and then sort of walked it back. Well, the president was heading to the UK. This is a few days ago. And he was asked about hate speech and he labeled, and he said that ABC News had engaged in a form of hate speech. Now, the president of the United States sued ABC News for having selectively edited a Kamala Harris interview. That may be many things. It could be a form of discrimination. It could be a form of libel, depending on how it was cut. Is it hate speech? Like, are we really broadening out hate speech to just mean things I don't like? Like, this is a problem. It's not good. Here we go.
Should probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart. Maybe they'll come after ABC. Well, ABC paid me $16 million recently for a form of hate speech, right? Your company paid me $16 million for a form of hate speech. So maybe they'll have to go after you.
Okay, and this follows upon the president filing a $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times, claiming that the paper is a full-throated mouthpiece of the Democratic Party. The suit points to 3 articles and a malicious, defamatory, and disparaging book. And it points to the editorial board's endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. So, again, having looked at the lawsuit, I do not think that lawsuit's going to go very far. But regardless of whether you think that it's good or bad or whatever, the bottom line is this. In the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination, the murder of Charlie Kirk by a left-wing, radical, gay man in a relationship with a furry trans, in the aftermath of that, if the narrative that comes after that is not violent leftist groups must be found, rooted out, and destroyed, that their funders must be ferreted out and prosecuted, that permission structures on the social level for violent ideologies must be removed. If that's not the narrative coming out of Charlie's assassination, and the narrative instead is we need to go after using governmental power, not social sanction, which is fine, governmental power. We need to go after people that we don't like on the air. That is going to be, forget about, again, whether it's good or bad morally. It is political malpractice. It is a mistake. Now, the good news for the Trump administration and the Republicans is that the backlash from people on the left is so overwrought and insane in its size and scope that it may obliterate the very point that they are trying to make. Truly. Already coming up, I want to get to things the government actually should be focused on, other than like Jimmy Kimmel, if that's what they're focused on. They should be focused on, violent left-wing groups actually doing acts of violence first. In business, they say you can have better, cheaper, or faster, but you only get to pick two. What if you could have all three at the same time? That's exactly what Cohere, Thomson Reuters, and Specialized Bikes have since they upgraded to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. OCI is the blazing fast platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs, where you can run any workload in a high availability, consistently high performance environment and spend less than you would with other clouds. How's it faster? OCI's block storage gives you more operations per second. Cheaper? OCI costs up to 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, 80% less for networking. Better, in test after test, OCI customers report lower latency and higher bandwidth versus other clouds. This is the cloud built for AI and all your biggest workloads. Right now, with zero commitment, try OCI for free. Head on over to oracle.com/Shapiro. Again, that's oracle.com/Shapiro. Go check them out. Zero commitment, try OCI for free. Oracle.com/Shapiro. Also, have you ever wondered why elite athletes, business moguls, high performers are using Armra colostrum? It's because Armra colostrum packs over 400 natural nutrients that work at the cellular level to build muscle, speed recovery, and boost performance. No artificial stuff, just the pure fuel for whatever you're tackling. Think of it as your body's natural defense system upgrade. It strengthens your immune barriers throughout your entire body while supporting your gut wall system for better digestion and less bloating. Plus, it helps your body absorb nutrients more effectively and keeps your metabolism running smoothly. You'll also notice the difference in your skin's radiance thanks to natural antioxidants and collagen-boosting compounds. Plus, there's a reason elite athletes have been using colostrum for years. It enhances endurance and speeds up recovery so you can bounce back faster. The bottom line, Armra colostrum gives your body comprehensive support to thrive naturally. We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 30% off your first subscription order. Go to armra.com/Shapiro or enter Shapiro to get 30% off your first subscription order. That's armra.com/Shapiro. Jon Stewart did a special weekday break-in. So he hasn't been broadcasting more than once a week. And he decided that he was going to break into The Daily Show, right? He was going to just do a special episode. Now, notice, no special episode from Jon Stewart last week after Charlie was actually killed. Right? No special episode about the importance of free speech after a person he disagreed with was shot to death in front of 3,000 people and countless others on the internet. No break-in for that. But he's breaking in because his friend, Jimmy Kimmel, got suspended from the air. He did a 23-minute monologue on this. A 23-minute monologue suggesting that the state was going to come after everybody on the left. Now, one thing I noticed about Jon Stewart is that, in fact, he is under no threat. If he thought that he were actually under a threat, he wouldn't have done this particular lecture. So he showed up, and his shtick was that the background had been made up to look like a sort of Trumpian Mar-a-Lago. And he was wearing a jacket and a red tie to mimic Trump and a flag pin so he can claim that he's operating under fear. Now, Jon Stewart is not operating under fear. Let's be real. This is crocodile tears. He is not operating under the assumption that his free speech life is over in the United States. But this is the narrative being retailed by the left.
We have another fun, hilarious, administration-compliant show. Doing? Shut up. Blow this for us. We're coming to you tonight from a real hole. The crime-ridden cesspool that is New York City. It is a tremendous disaster like no one's ever seen before. Someone's National Guard should invade this place, am I right? Shut the f*** up!
He did this for 23 minutes. For 23 minutes he did this. Right, for 23 minutes he did this routine. The lady doth protest too much. Stephen Colbert then came out and said, we are all Jimmy Kimmel. And what he really means is I am Jimmy Kimmel. Okay, now, even if Jimmy Kimmel, if it turns out that he was taken off the air because of FCC pressure, which again, I think is very, very doubtful just on the merits. Even if that were the case, Stephen Colbert was not taken off the air because of Trump administration pressure. That's not true. In fact, here is the ex-Paramount chief, Sherry Redstone, pointing out that Stephen Colbert's cancellation had literally nothing to do with anything governmentally related.
I'm not going to tie any of that to regulatory approval. I can tell you that we had been looking at late night. It was financially not viable. It had been that way for a long time. We had made a decision months prior to the announcement that we were not going to be going forward with that show. I love Stephen. He does a great job, but we really needed to be in a financially viable business. And you saw we did that with James Corden as well. And in terms of DEI, I think the reasons why DEI exists matter and will always matter, and we need to continue to fight for those issues. But I think the way in which DEI has been executed has often led to more problems than it solved.
Okay, so that's Sherry Redstone saying Colbert was not taken off the air because of some sort of evil right-wing Trumpian plot. It's because he sucked at his job and because he cost too much money. Well, here was Stephen Colbert saying, we are all Jimmy Kimmel. So first of all, let me point out, Stephen Colbert isn't even Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel isn't really Jimmy Kimmel by the left's definition of what's going on here, because probably, again, he was taken off the air for being a jackhole who was bad at his job with low ratings. I'm not Jimmy Kimmel. I'm on the internet. I'm not, no one has the luxury of a broadcast show. But the left is going to try to whip up the narrative. We'll see if it works. It may not work at all. I think the best solution for all of this is to remove the power of the FCC to regulate content. That would be, I think, a good solution. But in the absence of that, again, the left protesting about this after spending, 60 years using the FCC to crack down on its own political opposition is a little bit strained. Here's Stephen Colbert complaining. So, again, one of the great tragedies of our time, according to the left, Jimmy Kimmel being removed from the air under disputed circumstances, Mark Maron doing the same thing. They can come for all of us. It's basically like Kristallnacht. Here we go.
Jimmy Kimmel has been muzzled and taken off the air by his network ABC, who are buckling to and trying to appease the Nexstar media conglomerate, who have a lot of affiliates, and they threaten to preempt him at the suggestion of the FCC chair. This is government censorship. This is the Trump administration coming after people who speak out against him. This is the end of it. If you have any concern or belief in real freedom or the Constitution and free speech, this is it. This is the deciding moment. This is what authoritarianism looks like right now. In this country, it's happening.
And it's so overwrought. Mark Maron, so overwrought. You can hear the jackboots at the door. They're about to break it down and arrest Mark Maron for that absolutely anti-authoritarian diatribe. Or maybe he's, just living his normal life today, because we actually don't live in an authoritarian country. And by the way, a court is very likely to intervene if, in fact, there is a lawsuit and it turns out that the FCC improperly used its power against Jimmy Kimmel. Now, again, I think there might, in fact, be a case that the FCC did not even necessarily improperly use its power on a legal level. But this is why the FCC should not have that power in the first place. Again, I'm old enough to remember when Republicans opposed the Fairness Doctrine, because the Fairness Doctrine was an attempt to stop right-wing opinions from being disseminated. And at a certain point, there's a difference between saying, we need to use the rules against you the way you use them against us so that we can all stop using those rules and instead create a new system of rules. There's a difference between that and saying, you broke the rules. I'm going to break the rules even further. I'm going to hit you, and you're going to hit me. It's just a sheer power dynamic, a spiral. David Letterman emerged from his house in the woods, where I assume he's only writing Unabomber journals, to go to the vaunted Atlantic Festival to talk about how this is criminal, an authoritarian administration. Again, this is maybe it'll work for them. It seems to me it's so overwrought it won't. But this is the attempt. One of the critiques I'm making here is there is no reason for the Trump administration to have even given this issue to the Democrats in any way. It is not useful. Nothing is gained. In any case, here's Letterman.
For 30 years, I did this for a living. So I see this happen. They took care of Colbert. That was rude. That was inexcusable. The man deserves a great deal of credit. He's in the Hall of Fame 9 times. And to be manipulated like that because the Ellison family didn't want to trouble Donald Trump with this move, so they got rid of him. Not only got rid of him, got rid of the whole franchise. You're not going to have to worry about anything, Larry. It's all gone. It's fine. Good night. And then my good friend Jimmy Kimmel, I feel bad about this because we all see where this is going, correct? It's managed media, and it's no good. It's silly. It's ridiculous, and you can't go around firing somebody because you're fearful or trying to suck up to an authoritarian criminal administration in the Oval Office. That's just not how this works.
So this is going to be the unified Democratic claim that's exactly what is happening, that this is a fascist authoritarian takeover. Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, who for some weird reason believes that he is going to run for president, he says this is about Trump silencing his political opponents. And then he actually says that people should take to the streets. There should basically be giant protests in favor of Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, good luck with that one, my dude.
Donald Trump, in the wake of the tragic murder of Charlie Kirk, has decided to exploit that tragedy to try to silence his political opponents. I think Kimmel is just the beginning. I think you're going to see a potential dizzying campaign of political repression against anyone who opposes this president.
Okay, and then he actually asked for people to take to the streets. Yeah, call it the late night riots. Here we go.
Understands the gravity of this moment. This is a moment for the country to mobilize. This is a moment for all of us to be out on the streets protesting, because if you don't raise your voices right now about the assault on free speech, about Donald Trump's decision to disgustingly exploit the murder of Charlie Kirk so as to try to permanently render powerless and impotent those who politically oppose him, there may be no democracy to save a year from now. This is a red alert moment, man. It feels like the red alert has been on since January, but the days are getting darker, which means the obligation on us to stand up and mobilize is getting more urgent.
Now, on a broad level, it may not work. This kind of sort of democratic authoritarian op. It may not work specifically because the Democrats were for, solidly a couple of decades here, quite authoritarian in their approach to things like speech. We all remember the woke revolutions, where if you didn't post the black square, then you were in danger of losing your job. We all remember Barack Obama using the law to spy on James Rosen, the Associated Press journalist. We remember Joe Biden using the power of the government to crack down on major social media companies in order to get them to mirror his political priors. We all remember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calling for more censorship. Right? This wasn't that long ago. It was like 2 years ago. Here's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doing this.
Several members of Congress in some of my discussions have brought up media literacy, because that is a part of what happened here. And we're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation. It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false. And so that's something that we're looking into.
Okay, so again, the right is saying, okay, turnabout is fair play. And the left is saying, we never did that in the first place. This, for the country, probably doesn't go anywhere good. The best possible solution, once again, is for the government to spend its time on the actual things that matter. Go after leftist radical groups who are violent in orientation. Go after their monetary sponsors. Go after the leftist networks of thought on a social level that incentivize violence. Do all of those things. Yeah, It's frustrating that the conversation could be so clear and so unified and so easy. It really could. And getting caught in these rabbit trails is counterproductive in the extreme. Alrighty, coming up, what Republicans should be doing, what the administration should be doing. Well, we have some information about violent left-wing groups that obviously should be receiving serious law enforcement scrutiny. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day. On Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Producer Jake has been doing great. Like, honestly, the picks that he is making so far, paying off. I'm afraid that he's going to become so successful that we'll lose a good producer, but gain an amazing football picker. Prize Picks is the ultimate way to turn your football knowledge into cash this season. With millions of users already on board, this safe and reliable skill-based daily fantasy platform lets you build your lineups in under 60 seconds by selecting more or less on 2 to 6 player projections. Whether you're confident about which players will exceed expectations or which ones might fall short, Prize Picks gives you the opportunity to cash in on your sports expertise. Available in over 40 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia, it's never been easier to enjoy daily fantasy action while watching your favorite games unfold. Download the app today. Use code BEN to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code BEN to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Also, today, there's a tragedy unfolding in America. In fact, every day, about 3,000 pregnancies end in abortion, and currently 1 in 4 pregnancies does not make it to birth. There is something that can be done. Across the country, preborn network clinics are standing with women in the darkest hours of uncertainty. They offer genuine compassion, practical help, and the resources needed to empower women to make informed choices. This year alone, their efforts have helped rescue more than 38,000 babies, each one a life given a chance because someone actually cared enough to be there and to help. A single moment, such as a mom seeing her baby on an ultrasound screen, can change literally everything. It's powerful. Studies show that simple act can double the likelihood a woman will choose life for her child. These clinics are not just saving lives, they're offering hope and support when it's needed the most. If you knew you could make a difference and save lives today, wouldn't you choose to do something? You can. Right now, just $28 provides a life-saving ultrasound. Go to preborn.com/Ben. That's preborn.com/Ben, or dial pound 250, say keyword baby. That's pound 250, baby. You know, there are a lot of things you can do in life to make the world better, but can you save a life? You actually can if you head on over to preborn.com/Ben and get involved. Well, meanwhile, thinking of things the Trump administration can do, as I've been saying, they should be focused like a laser directly on left-wing violent groups. What the evidence tends to show in the case of the assassination of Charlie Kirk is that the assassin was coordinating with people on Discord about what he was going to do. That's what the evidence seems to show. There were people who were putting out posts that they later deleted, predicting that Charlie would be murdered on the day that he was murdered a month in advance. That investigation has to be done, obviously. And we know that there are these violent left-wing groups that have basically gone without much law enforcement scrutiny for whatever reason. That needs to stop. According to the Daily Wire, Luke Rosiak reporting, a 10,000-member strong group called the Socialist Rifle Association has been conducting weapons training for transgender and Marxist-Leninist extremists. And its members have been linked to at least 4 major crimes, including the firebombing of Tesla dealerships, a Daily Wire investigation found. Members stock up on assault rifles and tactical gear like gas masks and receive membership cards bearing an image of Karl Marx and the quote, "Any attempt to disarm workers must be frustrated by force if necessary." Videos show them preparing for engagements that look more like war than self-defense, running through the woods and hitting long-range targets. A common logo is the transgender flag with an assault rifle and the phrase, "Defend Equality." SRA members say that their interest is to defend against fascists and Nazis, but according to court documents, they apply those labels loosely, citing incidents like the January 6th Capitol protests where guns were largely absent as a reason to prepare for war. Apparently, the SRA has a chapter in Utah where Charlie was murdered. It advertises, quote, inclusive firearms education with a rainbow-colored target and the tagline, women-friendly, BIPOC-friendly, queer-friendly. One of its posters says, quote, "I will die fighting for this cause," a quote attributed to John Brown, a radical abolitionist who was murdered by the capitalist slave-owning class. On June 19th, the Utah chapter asked members to support Arturo Gamboa, an anti-racist accused of murder. Apparently, the chapter and SRA's national headquarters told the Daily Wire that Tyler Robinson, who's been charged with murdering Charlie, was not a member, but they did not answer whether his transgender-identifying boyfriend, Lance Twiggs, was, citing their own confidentiality policies. The SRA Reddit thread falsely claimed years ago that Charlie was openly calling for the lynching of transgender individuals. After Kirk was assassinated, SRA members mocked him, expressed enthusiasm, and wished that the man who shot President Trump had similar marksmanship. There are a number of crimes that have been linked to SRA members. On July 4th, a group of militants allegedly swarmed law enforcement at an ICE facility in Alvarado, Texas, and opened fire at the unarmed DHS correctional officers. One of them, Benjamin Hennel Song, is charged with shooting a police officer in the neck. Song was a member of the SRA's Dallas-Fort Worth chapter, a fellow group member told KERA. Of the 10 co-defendants charged with attempted murder of a federal officer, at least 2 claimed to be transgender. Authorities recovered 9 firearms in the home, where one of them lived with 6 other transgenders. On March 18th in Las Vegas, Paul Hyen Kim set on fire and shot up 5 Teslas, leaving a Molotov cocktail inside one, according to charging documents. The court papers said that this person had an Instagram page where he followed the SRA's page. On January 20th, the day that Donald Trump was sworn in as president, Adam Matthew Lansky allegedly threw Molotov cocktails at a Tesla dealership in Salem, Oregon. Lansky is a competitive shooter and a former member of the SRA, according to prosecutors. In October 2021, Daniel Allen Baker of Florida was sentenced to 44 months in prison for threats. After the pro-Trump Capitol protest on January 6th, 2021, Baker offered cash rewards for information leading to the verified identification of every individual in this video. Don't worry, I won't be going to the cops. We have decided to handle this ourselves. Apparently, he told prosecutors he was a member of the SRA. Apparently, the SRA was incorporated in Kansas in 2019 by Alexander Tackett, who later began identifying as a woman named Alex Norma Tackett. A website for a queer bookstore he owned said, quote, Lilith, it, she, and Alex Tackett, she, it, are a trans lesbian couple living in Wichita with their 6-year-old son, which is just wonderful. Its co-founder was Faye Eklar, who explained, quote, I believe firearms ownership is necessary because as a transgender socialist, half the country wants me dead, and the other half is happy to watch. Plus, the means of production won't seize themselves. This is why we say that there are violent ideologies. Yes, there certainly are, and they are attached to violent groups. Meanwhile, a new report from Ryan Morrow over at Capital Research says that since 2016, George Soros's Open Society Foundations, now run with his son Alexander, has poured over $80 million into groups tied to terrorism or extremist violence. Open Society sent millions of dollars into U.S.-based organizations that engage in quote-unquote direct actions the FBI defines as domestic terrorism. Those groups include the Center for Third World Organizing and its militant partner Ruckus Society, which trained activists in property destruction and sabotage during the 2020 riots, and the Sunrise Movement, which endorsed the Antifa-linked Stop Cop City campaign, in which activists currently face over 40 domestic terrorism charges and 60 racketeering indictments. At the same time, Open Society awarded $18 million to the Movement for Black Lives, a group that co-authored a radical guide glorifying the Hamas October 7th massacre and instructs activists on the use of false IDs, blockades, and economic disruption. Open Society has also funneled more than $2.3 million into Al-Haq, an NGO based in the West Bank in Israel and long accused of ties to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. In September 2025, the State Department sanctioned Al-Haq, citing its role in advancing campaigns that, quote, directly engaged in the ICC's illegitimate targeting of Israel. So there are things for law enforcement to do. There are things for law enforcement to investigate. And that is where we should be able to find unity. Violation of the law is where we should be looking. Violation of the law. And social sanction should be enough. Jimmy Kimmel should have been fired because the people said no to Jimmy Kimmel. That is the way to do this. And that is the way to create a more unified response to the horrifying murder of Charlie Kirk. Meanwhile, I got to say, the left's softness on crime just continues at pace. It truly is amazing. Mayor Brandon Johnson, the worst mayor in America, which is saying a lot. We have some pretty bad mayors. He's the mayor of Chicago. And yesterday, he said that law enforcement is a sickness. I wonder why people want the National Guard in Chicago. I can't imagine.
The fact of the matter is we are driving violence down on this city, and we're using every single resource that's available to us. Jails and incarceration and law enforcement is a sickness that has not led to safe communities.
Well, you know, if you think that law enforcement is the sickness, you might get more crime. I'm just putting it out there. It's possible. It's just possible. So, you know, I think that this is a little over the top. This is a little over the top from the Democrats. Do they just want to lose elections? Jasmine Crockett, the not particularly intelligent representative from Texas, who somehow has become a resistance hero, an icon. She says committing crimes doesn't make you a criminal. No, literally it does. Literally it does.
When people are like, oh, you know, crime is terrible. And yes, it is, right? Like, because when somebody goes out and commits a crime, they don't typically, you know, say, well, I'm a D or I'm an R, I'm an I. It's not like literally like It's about, well, how do you fix it? How do you make communities safer? And I do think that I'm in a unique situation because I was having the conversations with people that were going out and committing crimes. And so I understood what was kind of pushing them there. And so I do want people to know that just because someone has committed a crime, it doesn't make them a criminal. That is completely different. Being a criminal is more so about your mindset. Committing a crime can come for a lot of different reasons.
Deep thoughts there from Jasmine Crockett. Well, apparently Democrats want to lose elections. It's amazing, but apparently this is the thing they would like to do. Speaking of suicidal Democratic policy, apparently Democrats now want to do a government shutdown, which is going to work out very poorly for them. The Republicans are pushing forward with basically a clean CR, a 7-week continuing resolution that continues to fund the government at its current levels. And Democrat senators say that unless Republicans scrap their plan to advance it, they don't see any option other than defeating it as a way to send a message to President Trump and then trigger a shutdown. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer has been taking flack from his left flank for his failure to go along with the government shutdown earlier this year. One Democratic senator says, Donald Trump gave us the finger. There is no alternative. Well, no, actually, the alternative would be to pick ground that you can win on. But, good luck. The party would likely need at least 8 votes to help Republicans reach the 60 votes necessary to move Senate legislation forward. Senator Rand Paul, who of course votes against everything, says he's going to vote against the CR. Apparently, there are a bunch of Democratic senators who are not going to vote for the shutdown. That includes the only sane Democratic senator left, John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada, Jackie Rosen in Nevada, and Angus King in Maine. By the way, all of them in swing states, you will notice, because they understand that it's poison for them to do this, politically speaking. Meanwhile, Speaker Johnson says that they will, in fact, pass the CR. That is the goal. Here he was.
Republicans are going to do the responsible thing. We will pass a CR here tomorrow out of the House. I suspect, sounds like we won't have many Democrats to assist in that, and that's a really sad state of affairs.
But do you have the votes tonight, Mr. Speaker?
I believe we have the votes to do it, yes. We'll send it over to the Senate, and I suspect they'll be able to process that.
So it seems to me that Democrats are putting themselves in an unenviable political position, but this seems to... It's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see how it works out for them. Alrighty, as we continue here on the Ben Shapiro Show, Kamala Harris's book is coming out, and we have some interesting book reviews. Apparently, she is big mad. Her book, 107 Days, is just filled with joy, so much joy and so much pride. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member, use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us. Zohran Mamdani is about to be elected. Is he already in hot water with his left-wing base, or is it all going to be just fine? Meanwhile, the government shutdown continues and Snap is about to cut out. We'll get to all of that. Plus, it's Halloween, the last day of October, and the Daily Wire's biggest month yet. We premiered our new flagship show, Friendly Fire. We released powerful new documentaries, including The 1916 Project, USS Cole, Al-Qaeda's Strike Before 9/11, and Hiding in Plain Sight. We gave members access to the Halloween thriller Nefarious. We welcomed Matt Fradd as the newest voice joining the Daily Wire. We introduced the Daily Wire Lifetime Membership. And we gave you the first look at the Pendragon cycle, The Rise of the Merlin, coming January 22nd. You can get access to all of it and everything coming next for under $7 a month with our deal of the decade. But time is running out. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe and start watching this weekend. Well, the first rule of Marxist revolution is that it must always eat its own. And we're beginning to see that even before Zohran Mamdani is elected mayor of New York. Very high likelihood that that is going to happen. According to the betting markets, it is almost a certainty, actually, that Zohran Mamdani becomes the mayor of New York. Over on Kalshi, for example, he's like a 92% shot of becoming the mayor of New York. And barring some sort of cataclysmic event like Curtis Sliwa dropping out in the next 5 minutes, it is very likely that Mamdani becomes mayor of New York, specifically because the vote splits and he wins with 45% of the vote or something. But the heartburn is already setting in, because here is the problem. Once people begin to govern, it turns out that there are actual rules to governance. You actually have to be a person capable of carrying out the office of mayor, and there are obstacles to that. And so all of the bizarre radical signaling that you've been doing runs up against reality. And make no mistake, Zohran Mamdani is as radical as it is possible for a candidate to be. The man has embraced Marxism. He has embraced jihadism. I mean, remember, this is a person whose parents are radical. I mean, he's a second generation radical. I mean, here is some tape that just emerged of his father comparing Abraham Lincoln to Adolf Hitler. This is in 2022. I guess it's very recent footage.
Abraham Lincoln generalized the solution of reservations. They herded American Indians into separate territories. For the Nazis, this was the inspiration. Hitler realized two things. One, that genocide was doable. It is possible to do genocide. That's what Hitler realized.
Yeah, well, again, this is the well from which Zohran Mamdani draws. And he came to America as one of the privileged scions of an immigrant family. His father, a Columbia University anti-American professor. His mom, an anti-American producer. Both of whom believed in this sort of racial hierarchy of victimhood. And now he's the leading candidate for mayor of New York. He's going to run up against some problems. And this is a point that Politico makes. Zohran Mamdani and the New York City Democratic Socialists of America will have some relationship issues to iron out if he's elected mayor of the nation's largest metropolis. The DSA has been integral to his success. And as we discussed on the show, the DSA is a revolutionary movement. They are not interested in governance. They are interested in revolution. They want to overthrow capitalism. They want to overthrow the Constitution. They hate all of these things. But the problem is that once they get people elected to office, those people usually have to operate at least within some boundaries. As Politico points out, how the arrangement will work out should Mamdani win on November 4th is uncharted territory. Christina Greer of Fordham University says one of two things will happen. They'll give him a grace period and let him get his sea legs and recognize compromise as a way to get something done, or they become one of his biggest obstacles. And if that happens, he'll be fighting people from the right and the left. Well, again, it is clear that he is going to, in some areas, moderate because he doesn't want to completely destroy all credibility with the New York population. So, for example, he wants to retain the NYPD Commissioner, Jessica Tisch. And he is committed to following through with the city's plan to build 4 new jails to replace Rikers, which is something that both he and the DSA had previously opposed. Well, we'll see if they give him any space. My theory is that they will give him some space, that they will allow him to be as revolutionary as he wants to be within the formatics that have been provided to him, and then they will gradually hollow out the movement. What the DSA is realizing is something that people on, I think, all sides of the political aisle are realizing, is that if you maintain your extremely radical ground, but you operate within the party system, you're able to more quickly take power than if you operate outside the party system and just try to browbeat people. That hijacking a party, as it turns out, is way, way, way easier than forming your own. That ideologically twisting and turning people, or kind of the soft libs, into Marxist fellow travelers is incredibly easy because people will go along with it in order to, quote unquote, stop the other side. Tribalism in politics means the death of the normie center. That's what it means. It means that the DSA, of course, in the end, I think this heartburn, this angst, it's going to be overplayed. They know exactly who Zohran Mamdani is. They know he's a revolutionary, and they are perfectly happy to fellow travel with him, knowing that his heart is in the revolutionary place. Now, maybe he ends up stopping short. Maybe they end up turning on him when he's no longer useful to the movement. Marxist movements have a real habit of doing this. They will turn on absolute butchers like Leon Trotsky if it turns out that he is now inhibiting the next step of the revolution. But my inclination would be that they will give Zohran Mamdani an awful lot of rope with which to hang the city of New York before they make those sorts of moves. And again, the Democratic Party has now built itself around the radicals, which is why you see Ilhan Omar out there as a chief advocate for Zohran Mamdani on the basis that Zohran Mamdani is being attacked for his Islamic religion, not for the pro-jihadism or the pro-Marxism, or for the fact that he's never held a real day job and that he's one of the great leeches on the butt of American society. Now, according to Ilhan Omar, it's all the resistance to Zohran Mamdani is about the fact that he's a Muslim. Here she was on CNN.
Well, the tsunami of the anti-Muslim attacks that we are seeing is deeply concerning. And I would hope that the Democratic leader in the Senate would recognize that and would offer support not just to Mamdani, but the million Muslims who live in New York City and the millions who live in New York and in America.
Now, again, the revolution is the only thing that matters here. The truth doesn't matter. The revolution is the only thing that matters. And apparently that's true even for many voters in New York. There's a brand new poll out, according to the UK Daily Mail, done for Jail Partners, talking about what New Yorkers think is going to happen if Mamdani is elected. In that poll, he has a 15-point lead over Andrew Cuomo, the former New York governor. The poll shows that many New Yorkers who do not support Mamdani are convinced he's going to destroy New York. They think that his mayoralty will mark a return to urban decay of the 1980s when the city was blighted by poverty, rampant crime, crumbling infrastructure, and abandoned buildings. Even his own supporters think he will make anti-Semitism in New York worse rather than better, which of course is obviously true since he really, really, really is an anti-Semite. Among voters who have made up their minds, Mamdani was on 46% support according to the poll. He has a 35-point lead over Cuomo for voters under the age of 30, according to this new poll. The poll finds that New Yorkers expect a huge variety of problems to get worse under Mayor Mamdani. 47% of New Yorkers think crime and violence will get worse. Only 32% believe the city will be safer. For voters under 30, 49% believed that safety would improve under Mamdani. But among the over 65s, only 26% thought the city would be safer, showing that there's a real problem with prefrontal cortex development among people under the age of 30, obviously. Most New Yorkers think that there will either be no change or that affordability of housing will get worse under Zoran Mamdani. The vast majority of New Yorkers think that the number of businesses will either stay the same or go down. 43% of New Yorkers, a plurality, think that number of businesses will go down. The risk of terrorism will dramatically rise, 39-18. And so, again, it's not as though New Yorkers are unaware of what's happening here. New Yorkers are perfectly aware. It's just that they are willing to risk it. They're willing to risk it because they want to make the revolutionary statement. They want the revolutionary statement. In fact, non-Mamdani voters, they say that disaster is like the number one thing about Mamdani. Like, there's a word cloud of words that they use when they're polled, how to describe Mamdani. And they said, New York will be a disaster, a bleep hole, destroyed in hell. How about the people who like him? The people who like him say affordable, improved, equitable. Okay, so New York City is split like much of the rest of the country, right down the middle. But in the end, the bottom line is that most New Yorkers, a plurality of New Yorkers, understand things are going to be bad, but they don't have the strength to stop him. That is the real key to this election. The key to this election is not that Mamdani is overwhelmingly popular. He is not. He's scoring in the mid-40s in every poll. The key to the election is no one has the balls to stop him. Sliwa is not dropping out, which means support can't consolidate around Cuomo. Cuomo's attack lines all seem to be directed at Republicans rather than at Mamdani, bizarrely, suggesting, well, if Mamdani takes over, then Trump is going to attack this. Really? That's your line? Your line isn't that he's going to make crime worse and prices worse and back jihadism and back anti-Semitism and Marxism? The moderate, squishy left has given way to the radicals, and their silence speaks volumes. It is why you've seen so many mainstream Democratic figures swirl and swivel behind Mamdani and decide that it's perfectly fine for him to take a leadership position. And this is what happens to many parties, the so-called moderates who are more invested in the success of the party than they are in the principles of the party, give way to the people who are more interested in shifting and moving the principles of the party than they are in the success of the party. That is sort of the truism on both sides of the aisle when it comes to politics these days. Already coming up, the snap cutoff is coming. What does that mean for the government shutdown? First, buy gold, get free silver. That's right. For every $5,000 purchased from Birch Gold Group this month in advance of Veterans Day, they will send you a free patriotic silver round that commemorates the Gadsden and American flags. Look, gold just hit $4,000 an ounce. It's up over 50% since the beginning of this year. Birch Gold can help you own it by converting an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Plus, they'll send you free silver honoring our veterans on qualifying purchases. And if you're current or former military, Birch Gold has a special offer just for you. They're waiving custodial fees for the first year on investments of any amount. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, tens of thousands of happy customers, many of whom are my listeners, I encourage you to diversify your savings into gold. Birch Gold is great. I've gotten gold from them multiple times at this point. I've re-upped with them fairly recently. It's really easy. You give them a call, you ask them all your questions, and next thing you know, the gold's in your safe. Text my name, Ben, to the number 989898 for a free info kit and to claim your eligibility for free silver with qualifying purchase before the end of the month. Again, text my name, Ben, to 989898. Do it today. Text my name, Ben, to 989898. Also, all right, folks, let's talk about something that actually matters. Honoring American veterans on Veterans Day. Legacy Box has been with the Ben Shapiro Show for years. They've helped preserve the memories of over 1 million families. Now they're teaming up with all of us here at the Daily Wire to give back in a big way. Legacy Box is donating 10 grand worth of legacy boxes to American veterans. So those incredible stories of service and sacrifice don't get lost to time. Here's where it gets personal. If there's a veteran in your family, head on over to dailywire.com/legacybox or click the link in the show notes to submit your story for a chance to feature your legacy right here on our show. But if you don't have a veteran in your life, you still have a legacy that you need to preserve. Right now, Legacy Box is giving all of my listeners exclusive access to this deal in honor of Veterans Day. Just $9 per tape to digitally preserve your family memories. I mean, that really is priceless. Legacy Box is the world's largest digitizer. Again, they've helped over 1 million families relive those most important moments. If you order right now, you can still get your digitized memories back in time for the holidays so you can relive those precious moments as a family. There's nothing like watching yourself as a kid with your parents, with your grandparents. It's an amazing, amazing experience. Whether it's loved ones in uniform or your family's holiday mornings, preserve the stories that shaped you. Head on over to legacybox.com/Shapiro today to preserve your family's history. That's legacybox.com/Shapiro. Okay, meanwhile, the government shutdown continues apace. We're about to hit the SNAP cutoff tomorrow. That is when federal funding of SNAP is set to expire. This, of course, is dangerous political territory for everybody involved. A brand new poll shows that independents actually hold Trump and Republicans responsible for the shutdown. According to the latest polling data from Washington Post, ABC News, Ipsos, 45% say Trump and the GOP are mainly responsible for the shutdown. But 30%, actually, which is what they used to say Democrats were at 30%, 33% believe the shutdown is Democrats' fault in the latest poll. And among registered voters, 37% blame Democrats and 46% blame the Republicans. 3/4 of American adults say they are very or somewhat concerned about the shutdown. Concern is now growing. I mean, let's be real about this. Obviously, a huge number of Americans are dependent on SNAP. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. A huge number of Americans. I mean, in my own community, the call for private charity has gone out to replace that. We're giving because we want to make sure that people have food. In the story of SNAP really is the story of increased dependency in the United States and how government crowds out charity and generates poverty. I mean, the fact that there are 42 million Americans on SNAP is totally insane. 1 in 8 Americans is currently on SNAP. In 2023, we spent $145 billion on SNAP programs. And it's not just going to people who are abjectly poor. Something like 4 in 10 SNAP households have at least one working adult, meaning a large portion of people who are getting it already have jobs. SNAP has become actually what it actually is a corporate subsidy in many ways. And SNAP is basically a way to make sure that people who are making minimum wage at McDonald's have enough food on the table. If you got rid of SNAP, what would actually happen is a competition for workers that would require an increase in wages. So actually, corporations are very happy with SNAP. They don't bear most of the burden. The taxpayers pay most of the burden. And then they get to pay their workers less because SNAP is there to sort of fill in the gaps. And the rolls are not just ballooning because of economic hardship, but because eligibility over the years has exploded. A bunch of different states use something called broad-based categorical eligibility, which is a sort of loophole. And it actually allows people with incomes up to 200% of the poverty line qualify. And then sometimes it even waives the asset test entirely. So you can theoretically have a decent income and a nice car and even money in the bank and still qualify for SNAP. Millions of people have been invited onto the rolls. There's waste. There's abuse. Every time somebody tries to cut it or change it, people then claim that millions of people will go starving. And then there's a problem, which is illegal immigration. Federal law says that non-citizens aren't eligible for SNAP, but there are a bunch of loopholes and lax verification status that means benefits can actually flow to people in mixed status households. So for example, illegal immigrants come to the United States, they drop a baby, the baby is eligible for SNAP, now the whole household is eligible for SNAP. So a lot of the time, taxpayer money is covering families who are here not lawfully. There are certain conservative groups that estimate billions in benefits are indirectly supporting households with at least one illegal immigrant member. Well, it turns out all these numbers add up. I asked our friends and sponsors at Comet, a project of perplexity, since the LBJ era, how much have food stamps and the subsequent SNAP program cost American taxpayers? The answer? Since the introduction of the food stamp program during the LBJ administration and its evolution into SNAP, the total cost to American taxpayers has exceeded $1 trillion. $1 trillion. And you can see how it's elevated. And particularly in this period, it is elevated radically. In terms of estimated annual spending in billions, there's a chart that's provided by Comet here. In the 70s and 80s, it was $10 to $20 billion annually. Today, It is somewhere between $90 and $130 billion every single year and is only growing. And just like every other program, to understand SNAP, you have to understand that it started off as a fairly tiny program, and then it just expanded into this gargantuan program that eats up giant chunks of our budget. Now, again, none of this is to argue that we could immediately cut off SNAP or should immediately cut off SNAP. The reality is what we probably should do is push it back on the states, which is where the authority really should lie for helping out people in dire poverty. The idea that the federal government ought to take the predominant role in determining who gets food stamps in Mississippi is kind of ridiculous, frankly. And these are local issues, and the Constitution was written without the power of the federal government to do any of this sort of stuff. The federal government does not have the power to do this. It is a violation of the Constitution. That does not mean that localities, cities, states, churches shouldn't do something. But this is just another example of how things that start off as small programs end up just eating the entire budget of the federal government. If you want to talk about the expansion of the national debt, you can't do that without talking about these entitlement programs. This thing, like Social Security, started off under FDR, and it started off small. In 1939, FDR launched the first food stamp program. The goal at the time was sort of dual. One was to help people who were poor afford food, and the other was to boost the price of crops, because the Great Depression involved a shortage of money supply, and so one of the things that happened is prices dropped dramatically. And because prices dropped dramatically, farmers felt that they could not actually unload their crops. So the way that it worked originally is that people who are on relief, which is what they used to call welfare, could buy orange stamps that were equal to their normal food budget. They'd spend $1, and then they'd get 50 cents of blue stamps to buy surplus foods. Over about 4 years, 20 million Americans used that first food stamp program. At the very, very top of it, at the very top of the peak of the food stamp program, they had like 4 million enrollees. And then it ended during World War II. And then in 1960, it was sort of reinstated in 1961 because there was a bit of a rough economic bump. And there was a pilot program that basically let people buy stamps just to get more regular groceries as opposed to having a separate blue stamp. It was still a small program. In 1964, there were 380,000 recipients. Then came the LBJ era. And just like everything else in American life, the Constitution was ritually debased under LBJ. And LBJ expanded the food stamp program under the Food Stamp Act of 1964, which led to, by 1970, 10 million Americans on food stamps. And by 1974, 15 million Americans on food stamps. Reagan tried to cut it back a little bit. Then it was expanded again back in the early 1990s, late 1980s, early 1990s. And then it was cut back a little bit in the 1996 Welfare Reform Act. And then George W. Bush really expanded the food stamp program. It expanded eligibility, for example, for legal immigrants. After 5 years in the United States, one of the 1996 restrictions was that legal immigrants were not eligible for food stamps. And so now legal immigrants were eligible after some 5 years. Also, everybody started using EBT cards. So one of the things that food stamps used to be was sort of stigmatizing. Now, of course, it's not. It just swipes like a debit card. In 2008, Congress passed another farm bill that increased funding by $10 billion over 10 years and officially changed the name from food stamps to SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And the reason they did that is because they were afraid of the stigma attached to the idea of food stamps. Then the Great Recession hit. SNAP enrollment started to really climb. By 2008, 28.2 million people were on food stamps. And then Barack Obama, never let a good crisis go to waste, immediately, radically increased the size and scope of food stamps. A family of 4 got about $80 extra in SNAP every month as a recession boost. And the federal government started pouring in money and money and money and money. And enrollment skyrocketed. It went from 28 million in 2008 to 48 million in 2013. So nearly a doubling of the number of people on food assistance under Barack Obama. And then under Donald Trump, it dropped a little bit. And then COVID-19, and it exploded again to the point where now 42 million people are on food stamps. Okay, so that is a good object lesson in how small programs end up eating entire federal budgets. And there's waste, and there's fraud, and there's abuse, and there are ways to rein that in. But of course, everyone will demagogue the issue, and that will never happen. Okay, with that said, SNAP, the funding is set to end tomorrow. When that happens, the pressure to end the government shutdown is really going to ratchet up. And Democrats know this. This is why, presumably, this is what Democrats have been holding out for. Cory Booker, one of our more demagogic senators, he went onto the floor of the Senate yesterday, and he said we shouldn't have to choose between feeding families, namely food stamps, and giving families health insurance. Now, the thing is, Republicans are perfectly willing to sign off on SNAP. The CR would fund SNAP. It would not restore Obamacare benefits that Joe Biden put into place as a massive supposed temporary extension during COVID. But Cory Booker wants both, and he's going to hold up the people on food stamps in order to get it.
November 1st, most Americans will now know that their health insurance will rise astronomically. And as a result of that, millions will lose health insurance. And what that means is I've talked to families in New Jersey. I talked to a dad of a special needs daughter who said him and his wife are going to have to give up their health insurance to keep their child covered. These are real stories of real people. And so don't tell me we as the United States of America have to choose between feeding families and giving families health insurance. We can do both.
Okay, well, I mean, here's the thing. We cannot afford to do everything the Democrats say we can afford to do. This is how we end up with $38 trillion in debt and massive deficits. That was the entire reason for things like the one big, beautiful bill, by the way. And Cory Booker also said he doesn't understand this level of cruelty. My dude, it is your party that has held up a clean CR every time it's been presented.
And so I don't understand this level of cruelty from the Republican Party right now, especially because when I talk to New Jerseyans, and I've been meeting with people from hospital boards to people who run our food banks, many of them Republicans actually, who can't understand why we as a country would cause this much intentional pain to about half of our country that are struggling right now to make it.
Okay, so, again, this sort of projection is pretty astonishing. Speaker Johnson, for his part, he says, I'm not the one who's been drawing this line. Democrats have been drawing this line.
But why are you drawing the line now on 40 million Americans who literally will not be able to eat without government assistance? Why not help them in the short term? And why are they?
Wait a minute. Yeah. Wait, I reject the premise of the question. I'm not drawing the line. The Democrats are drawing the line. If we had a contingency fund that we could use, that would be done. The White House has demonstrated over and over, the executive branch, all the cabinet secretaries are doing everything they can to mitigate and reduce the pain.
Yeah, again, we'll have to see how all this plays out. My guess is that as the pain grows, you're going to see more Democrats drop off, because if you're in a purple state, you don't want to go home and explain why you keep voting against a clean CR. And as the country has sort of polarized politically, what that means is that the red state senators in this upcoming election are fairly safe. There are a lot of purple state senators who are blue, who are in a little bit of trouble, actually, in this upcoming election. Coming up, Kamala Harris just won't go away. First, there's a reason I'm proud to say Pure Talk is my wireless company, because they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, especially when it comes to supporting our veterans. This month, Pure Talk is choosing to support Canines for Warriors, an incredible organization that rescues and trains dogs, then pairs them with veterans struggling with PTSD. These are men and women who served with honor. When they come home, that brotherhood, that support network they had in the military, very often it just disappears. Canines for Warriors steps up to fill that gap, giving these heroes purpose, companionship, and healing. That's exactly why Pure Talk, a veteran-led company, supports them. Choose a wireless company that shares your values. And with talk, text, plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month, you could also be saving a lot of money. And I use Pure Talk all the time. Coverage is great, paying less money, and they share my values. So again, this is like an easy call. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro and make that switch today. Again, head on over to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Switch on over to America's wireless company. That's Pure Talk. Go check them out right now. puretalk.com/Shapiro and make the switch today. puretalk.com/Shapiro. Also, everything just feels expensive these days. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, it is a fortune. It's actually easy to brace for a higher price, easier than what you actually end up paying. When it comes to life insurance, actually, 72% of Americans overestimate how much it actually costs, because actually it costs less than you think it does. That's where Policy Genius comes in, making it fast, simple, surprisingly affordable to get covered so your loved ones have a financial safety net. See if Policy Genius can help you find 20-year life insurance policies starting at just $276 a year for $1 million in coverage. Shopping for life insurance can feel overwhelming, but Policy Genius makes the whole process simple and stress-free. In just a few clicks, you can compare quotes from top insurers across the country and find coverage that actually fits your needs and your budget. Their team of licensed agents is there every single step of the way, answering questions, handling the paperwork, even advocating for you, so you don't have to worry about the fine print. Instead of leaving you guessing, Policy Genius lays out your options clearly, coverage amounts, prices, terms, so you can make a confident choice. And with thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot, it's no wonder Policy Genius is trusted as the nation's leading online insurance marketplace for people looking to protect their families. Life insurance is super important. God forbid something happens to you. You want to make sure everybody's taken care of. Secure your family's future with Policy Genius. Head on over to policygenius.com/Shapiro to compare life insurance quotes from top companies. See how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Shapiro. All right, it's time for some fast facts. We begin with the fact that Kamala Harris is not president, thank God. Thank God. But that doesn't mean that she is not making the rounds. And the fact that she still has presidential ambitions speaks to the wonderful nature of America, where apparently literally anyone can fail upward and succeed. She has spent the last several weeks lamenting her downfall, talking about how terrible it is for Kamala Harris. Here she was just yesterday lamenting the fact that her staff downplayed her accomplishments, which would be nearly impossible. I'm not sure how you downplay zero. She had no accomplishments. I'm not sure how you downplay those accomplishments. Apparently, she's pissed off her staff downplayed her non-existent accomplishments.
What wasn't being said?
The accomplishments, the credibility of my leadership.
They thought that, and you say this on page 51, if you were shining, then Joe Biden was dimmed. So it was very much in their interests to make sure you were dimmed. One could argue then so that Joe Biden was shining.
Yeah, and that was, again, it was very short-sighted.
So according to Kamala Harris, it's because everybody was trying to boost Joe Biden, but not Kamala. Well, I'm old enough to remember because I'm more than 1 year old when the entire media decided that she was brat and she was cool and she was uber competent. Ninth look at Kamala Harris. Remember all this? I mean, do we all have short-term memory loss around here? Have we turned into Joe Biden with the Alzheimer's and everything? Like, what are we talking about here? Seriously. Like, the gaslighting here is so strong. And then but at the same exact time, by the way, that she says that people were downplaying her in order to upplay Biden, she'll go on Jon Stewart's show and call Joe Biden competent, which stuns even Jon Stewart.
Yo, I'm not talking about competence. Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm not talking about competence at all. No, I believe he was fully competent to serve.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do.
That surprises me, actually.
No, I do.
Well, that's a little bit awkward. That's a little bit awkward. Yeah, that Jon Stewart pause right there. And then she was asked by Jon Stewart about the Democratic establishment. She says, I don't know who that was. I have no idea who. You were the vice president of the United States. It was you. That would be you, lady.
Do you think that the Democratic establishment would agree with that?
I don't know who the establishment is at this point.
Right. Oh, God, that's a whole different problem, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it?
The Democratic establishment, those are the people who decided to make room for the nut jobs. And now, Kamala Harris is left out in the cold because she's uninspiring and terrible. She will go away. She's not going to run for president again. It would be foolhardy for her to do so. Even when she tries to do the thing that apparently animates Democrats, she's bad at it. Here she was ripping on Donald Trump's ballroom on Jon Stewart as though this is a great issue of import.
Are you kidding me? This guy wants to create a ballroom for his rich friends while completely turning a blind eye to the fact that babies are going to starve when the SNAP benefits end in just hours from now? Come on. So I'm not going to be distracted by, does the guy have a big hammer? What about those babies?
Really, she's so bad at this, truly. Well, good riddance to bad rubbish. I can't imagine many Democrats are going to be inspired by her latest book tour to want to bring her back around for another attempt. Meanwhile, ICE is now vowing that they are going to increase the number of raids up to and including during Halloween. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem on Thursday swiftly denied Governor J.B. Pritzker's request to halt immigration enforcement operations throughout Chicago for 3 days so children could safely celebrate Halloween. Noem said no. She said, we're not willing to put on pause any work we do to keep communities safe. The fact that Governor Pritzker is asking for that is shameful. I think, unfortunately, he doesn't recognize how important the work is that we do to make sure we're bringing criminals to justice and bringing them off the streets. Now, Pritzker is arguing that she's arresting legal citizens and it's terrifying people and kids can't go out and collect candy in Chicago. And she says, no, that is not what's happening.
He's just not telling the truth. He's lying. And, it's hard to fight constant lies and attacks from this governor, but we will constantly stand up for the truth and for those people that live in those neighborhoods who want peace, they want safety, and they want these criminals out. Every day we're on the streets of Chicago arresting people who have committed murders, rapists, those who are trafficking drugs and have been, victimizing that city for years. We finally have a president in the White House who wants to make this a safe environment for every single American citizen. And no matter what Governor Pritzker says, we're going to do our job. We're going to protect the people of Chicago.
Again, I'm bewildered as to why Democrats want to take this position. You want to talk about radical, idiotic positions? This is the equivalent of saying the police should stop enforcing crime for 3 days during Halloween because they might pick up potential criminals in areas that harm children or something. What are you talking about here? People committing crimes should be arrested and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, regardless of the day of the week or the year. That's really silly. Pritzker said he was respectfully requesting the pause from Friday to Sunday in and around homes, schools, hospitals, parks, houses of worship, and other community gatherings where Halloween celebrations are taking place. And he said it was based on a desire to protect communities throughout Chicago. Again, the idea being that ICE are the predators and that criminals are somehow the victims. That's the idea. Well, it's that kind of logic that Kristi Noem says is putting ICE agents at risk, which is probably true. Here she was talking about it.
By what Mayor Johnson's doing, by what Governor Pritzker is doing, it's endangering lives, and they need to stop. They need to stop because there's consequences to it. Their words have consequences, and we're seeing that. An 8,000% increase in death threats against law enforcement. That's horrific. That shouldn't be happening in America. That shouldn't happen anywhere in the world, and I blame them.
Okay. Again, I don't think she's wrong about all of this. Okay. Meanwhile, in other big news, the president has now called to resume nuclear testing. And the reason he's doing that is because Russia's doing nuclear testing. China's doing nuclear testing. And the idea is, guys, if you are trying to demonstrate your readiness, if you're trying to demonstrate your upgraded nuclear capacity, we can do the same thing. According to the New York Times, President Trump's unexpected declaration on Thursday that he was ordering the U.S. military to resume nuclear testing prompted visions of a return to the worst days of the Cold War, when the U.S., Russia, and China were regularly detonating new weapons, first in the atmosphere and outer space and then underground. It was an era of terrifying threats and counter-threats, of dark visions of Armageddon, and theories of deterrence by mutually assured destruction. Well, I mean, that wasn't a theory. That was a reality. That's why there wasn't a giant nuclear war, actually. That age supposedly ended with the arrival of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty nations agreed to in the mid-1990s. But not enough of the signatories ratified it for the treaty to come fully into force. President Trump said, we halted it many years ago, but with others doing testing, I think it's appropriate we do it also. Now, the only nation that's been regularly testing over the past quarter century is North Korea. They last conducted an explosive test in September of 2017. Russia made a declaration that they had tested 2 exotic delivery vehicles for nuclear weapons. So it is quite possible that what President Trump means is not that we're going to test nuclear weapons, but that we're going to test other weapons, missiles and such, because that's what Russia is doing. The last explosive test for China was 29 years ago. Now, again, do I think that Trump is actually going to revive nuclear testing for no reason because Pyongyang did something in 2017? I do not. But I think that the president saying to Russia and China, guys, back off. Back off. If you do this, we're going to do the same thing. We're not going to sit by and watch you revivify your nuclear programs while we don't update, while we don't prepare. Mutually assured destruction, which was a successful theory, rested on the assumption that you could, in fact, and would, in fact, destroy the opposite side if they fired on you. And if that threat goes away, so does the mutually assured destruction. And if that happens, the nuclear likelihood actually becomes higher, not lower. So frankly, I'm fine with the president articulating this. Do I think the United States should unilaterally lead off a new round of nuclear testing before Russia and China do anything? I don't. But if Russia and China make moves to do this sort of stuff, of course we should signal. I don't see a choice but to counter signal, actually. And the sort of bizarre outrage that has erupted over this is though President Trump is ushering us into a new world of nuclear warfare. No, Russia and China are very, very aggressive right now, and both have threatened nuclear conflagration over the course of the last several years, Russia most particularly. Okay, meanwhile, I do want to point out one critic of the President of the United States. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene. If you ever wonder how the media works, this is how the media works. It's pretty astonishing. The media are perfectly happy to promote and prop up people who oppose President Trump, even if they hate them on all other fronts. The strange new respect happening here for Marjorie Taylor Greene, a double-digit IQ conspiracy theorist who got herself elected to a Georgia congressional seat and now seems to think she's an ideological thought leader of the Republican Party because she hangs around with famous podcast hosts. Well, apparently now she gets to go on The View. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that wonderful? Here's Whoopi Goldberg announcing excitedly that Marjorie Taylor Greene has earned the ticket to the big show.
That's why when you said Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm happy to say that she's going to be here on Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's election day.
Because
it happens to be election day.
And you know, I don't know how many things we agree on, but I know the one thing that she and I and all of us at this table agree on is this should not be affecting the American people.
Wow, that's how I know that she's a good person, is because she agrees with Whoopi Goldberg. But don't worry. Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't dividing the right. It's just anybody who notes that Marjorie Taylor Greene is dividing. If you notice that, you're dividing the right, apparently. Okay, meanwhile, our country is getting stupider. Idiocracy was a documentary. Kim Kardashian has become yet another famous person to suggest that the moon landing was faked. Which, I mean, good Lord. This is so stupid. I understand that we are now a country rife with conspiratorial nonsense, distrusting of all authorities, including the authority of actual honest-to-God history. But perhaps we should not listen to people who say dumb crap all the time. I don't know, just an idea.
I'm sending you, so far, 1 million interviews with both Buzz Aldrin and the other one.
Do it.
This girl says, what was the scariest moment? And he goes, there was no scary moment because it didn't happen. It could have been scary, but it wasn't because it didn't happen. So he's gotten old and now he slurs on his thing. Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. So I think it didn't happen.
I'm going to go on a massive deep dive is what's going to happen. Okay. I'm going to go on a serious deep dive.
I center conspiracies all the time.
Because you're not a smart person. I mean, that's the whole thing. And yet somehow there are people who believe that people who make them more unintelligent and less capable of understanding the world ought to be admitted to positions of high cultural authority. Actually, NASA acting administrator Sean Duffy fought back against this nonsense. He said, yes, Kim Kardashian, we've been to the moon before 6 times. And even better, Artemis is going back under the leadership of the president. We won the last space race. We'll win this one too. Yes, we've been to the moon. Just stop with this crap. Already coming up, Cabot Phillips from Morning Wire stops by. So does Andrew Klavan to talk about his new book. First, true self-reliance begins with taking control of your health. Armor Colostrum harnesses nature's original blueprint for resilience. Packed with over 400 bioactive nutrients, Colostrum fortifies your gut and strengthens your immune system from the cellular level up. When you invest in your health, you invest in your ability to show up fully, think clearly, and stay in control, no matter what comes your way. Look, our bodies are under constant assault. Toxins, processed foods, relentless stress. Your gut is your first line of defense. Most supplements only address part of the problem. Armor Colostrum is different. It isn't just another supplement. It's a bioactive whole food, a pure concentrate of bovine colostrum that's sustainably sourced with a commitment to calf-first sourcing. It's packed with over 400 bioactive nutrients that fortify your entire gut wall system, not just one piece. This means balanced and strengthened immune health, better digestion, less bloating, and support for healthy metabolism and fat burning from the inside out. Elite athletes have been using colostrum for years because it enhances nutrient absorption, builds lean muscle, and speeds recovery. But the benefits go deeper. Cellular level support for hair, skin, energy, everything. This isn't processed or manipulated. It's pure, potent, and natural. Your body's blueprint for rebuilding itself the way it was designed to function. 4 daily servings, infinite benefits. We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 30% off your first subscription order. Go to armor.com/Shapiro or enter Shapiro to get 30% off your first subscription order. That's armra.com/Shapiro. Also, you ever read protein bar labels and you feel like you're actually reading off the ingredients to a chocolate bar or something? Most health bars are packed with sugars and chemicals. My team and I have tried countless bars that either tasted just terrible or left all of us hungry again within an hour. Luckily, my team has now found Equip Foods Prime Bar. It's the first of its kind grass-fed beef protein bar with only real food ingredients and absolutely nothing to hide, with 20 grams of clean protein. Starting today, my listeners will receive an exclusive discount on Equip's Prime Bar, which has become our team's favorite protein bar on the market, with 20 grams of protein in every bar. Made with just 11 clean ingredients like collagen and colostrum, these bars deliver 20 grams of grass-fed beef protein without the bloat. They're free from whey, seed oils, and artificial additives. Plus, they're naturally sweetened with dates and honey, so they taste like dessert without the guilt. Producer Justin, he's been chowing down on these things. He likes the taste and he likes the protein even better. If you want to try the cleanest protein bar on the market that already sold out once, head on over to equipfoods.com/Ben Shapiro. Use code Ben Shapiro at checkout to get 25% off one-time purchases or 40% off your first subscription order for a limited time. That's EQUIPfoods.com/Ben Shapiro and use code Ben Shapiro at checkout. Okay. Now, speaking of anti-scientific positions, I noted weeks ago that when the Department of Health and Human Services decided to make a gigantic announcement with President Trump that Tylenol was driving autism in the unborn, that there was not enough evidence to support this position. And people got upset because if you point out that actual science did not support the position being taken, then this was somehow a betrayal of the cause or something, that MAHA couldn't survive unless you admitted that Tylenol causes autism, which again, the evidence is extremely scanty on that front. Well, now RFK has had to admit that the evidence is not sufficient to say that Tylenol causes autism, which, I mean, duh.
The causative association with between Tylenol given in pregnancy and the perinatal periods is not sufficient to say it definitely causes autism, but it is very suggestive. And it's suggestive in animal studies and core blood studies, in observational studies from nation to nation. And so there should be a cautious approach to it. And that's why our message to patients, to mothers, to people who are pregnant, and to the mothers of young children is consult your physician.
Okay, but that wasn't the way that it was laid out. And in fact, there are now gigantic lawsuits happening against Tylenol claiming that Tylenol causes autism. So yeah, I don't know, just an idea. Maybe you should go only as far as the science actually is capable of supporting without jumping to the conclusion that you have solved the autism crisis by going after Tylenol or something. Joining us online is Cabot Phillips of our Morning Wire podcast, who recently made his New York Times debut, which we'll get to in a moment since it is, of course, Halloween. But first, Cabot, I want to talk to you about your speech at the University of Iowa. Things got pretty heated over there.
Yeah, that's right. I've been going to a lot of college campuses, been to about a dozen college campuses this semester since Charlie Kirk's murder. This was a YAF event at the University of Iowa. And there were a lot of very angry leftist students that did not want me there. That happens at every campus. You know better than anyone how that happens when a conservative dares to show their face on a college campus. But there was one particular incident that happened at the University of Iowa that went very viral online. The students were out tabling, trying to advertise for the event. And a student came up, I believe you guys have the video, and was flipping the table, flipping people off, threatening them, and saying some obscene things to them as well. And I do have breaking news for the people that are watching that video. This was actually, I know this is going to shock people, this was, from what I've been told, a transgender student that was engaging in this activity. And I know it's hard to believe that a transgender college student could be capable of acting so irrationally, so illogically, so violently, but that is the situation. And during that event at the University of Iowa, during the week leading up to it, there were all sorts of students cheering this activity on, which makes sense when you know that this is how people feel about conservative ideas coming to campus. But most importantly was the response of people accusing me of doxing the liberal, allegedly transgender student that was flipping the table and threatening the YAF kids. I was doxing them for doing that, is what they accused, which is very ironic because the student was smiling to the camera, giving them the middle finger. The student was clearly very proud. They walked away and gave this dorky high five to one of the other leftist creeps that was standing behind cheering it on. So I don't know if doxing is the right accusation there. And then there were the number of kids saying they were going to come to the event, or the number of kids cheering on this student. And Ben, there were a good number of conservative students there. There were a good number of nice, politically agnostic kids in the middle. Not a single one of these crazy leftist students showed up. Not one of them came to debate. I would like to think that they were terrified of getting owned with facts and logic by Cabot Phillips. Maybe they were terrified that you would make a cameo appearance and that you would step in and smack them around, logically speaking. But none of them came, which again is not surprising. We see this kind of thing all around the country, but also we're seeing it more and more from administrations now too, trying to keep these conservative ideas from campus. I'll give you another example of this. The week before I was at Iowa, I was at the University of Maryland speaking to a Turning Point USA chapter there. The students put in the request, the university approved it, and then right before the event, the university said, hey, this is kind of dangerous speech. This is a controversial speaker from the Daily Wire that's coming. We're going to need to slap a private security fee on. So they told the Turning Point Group, you guys have to pay for a private security company to come in and search people's bags and have metal detectors. You have to pay because of threats from the left. They put it on the students. Now, the Turning Point Group was great. They said, we're not going to pay this. This is unconstitutional. Fire stepped in and sent legal letters to the school saying that this was a violation of the First Amendment because they were forcing the students to deal and have the onus because of threats from the left. And thankfully, ultimately, the Leadership Institute, a great conservative nonprofit, they stepped in and paid the security fees on behalf of Turning Point. But it didn't end there. Once the event started, I get to the campus. I actually thought that I was walking into the green room for the event because it was so tiny. It felt like the old closet I had in my Manhattan apartment. And I said, this is kind of a tiny room. This is weird. I guess there's something going on. The room quickly fills up with 40 conservative students. And then once they hit 40, the campus police made their appearance. They come in and they say, hey, the room is full for security reasons. We didn't give you guys the lecture hall. We had to have a small contained space for security. So the room is full at 40. Everyone else who was in the audience trying to get in, out in line, what appeared to be the vast majority of the audience, the university said, yeah, sorry, you guys can't come in. It's about safety. So they intentionally stuck us in the smallest classroom on campus for safety. But I think it was clear they wanted to protect the number of students that were actually going to hear those ideas.
I mean, these two events seem to be intertwined. The heckler's veto is obviously incredibly strong. I wonder, Cabot, if you know whether this particular student who we have footage of, I mean, let's show the footage so people understand what you're talking about. Here's some of the footage of students flipping tables. The one particular student flipping tables, going crazy over University of Iowa.
That's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, enjoying life. So here's my question is, were there any repercussions from the University of Iowa administration for this sort of behavior, or would they just kind of look the other way?
To the best of my knowledge, there were no consequences. The students told me that as of the time of the event, that nothing had been done, that this was very par for the course, that this sort of thing was a common occurrence there. And I've asked them to follow up if anything happens. Again, I have not heard that the university did anything, which you'd think that they would want to crack down on this sort of thing, given the environment, given how many Americans were horrified by what happened to Charlie and are now keeping a closer eye on what is coming from the left on college campuses. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of comments on a tweet that I posted from this video. So many of them were from parents saying, I have a student at Iowa, got into the University of Iowa circle, I guess, online. So many people saying, hey, I have a student here, or I have high school kids. I want them to go to the University of Iowa. Now I'm not sure. University of Iowa, what is your response? What are you going to do? So you'd think the school would want to step in and do something, but from what I've heard, they still have not.
So meanwhile, Cabot, amidst all of this, you had your debut in the New York Times on of all topics, terrible Halloween displays. So this is over at the New York Times. There's a piece called "Have Halloween Decorations Become Too Scary?" And you were quoted because you were talking about how you walk out of the way a couple of blocks with your 18-month-old son because people are putting up these scary displays. This actually is, I think, for a lot of families, a real issue. That people who are, I think, a little too into the pagan aspect of Halloween have decided that it'll be lots of fun to put, pretty horrifying and terrifying images in public view where small children can see them. What do you make of the phenomenon?
Well, they initially reached out because of some tweets that I had done saying that I think that people who put up overly gory and violent demonic displays should actively be shamed by people in their community. I might sound like a boomer here, but I remember growing up in the 90s, Halloween, crazy concept, was a holiday for little kids. You go trick-or-treating, you might see some spooky stuff, little ghosts and trees and maybe a little fake graveyard and skeletons, spider webs. But that is not what we're seeing more and more today with the advancements in technology and with the advancements of, creepy perverts in society. We have seen more and more overtly demonic, gory, over-the-top, violent displays. In my neighborhood alone, there's a 4-foot inflatable zombie toddler baby with fangs and blood dripping from its face and bulging red eyes. There are a number of decaying corpses hanging from nooses, swaying in trees. And so, when I'm walking with my son, he has no idea what he's looking at. He knows that he's terrified. I can't explain to him what it is. Hey, this is all fake. He's a little kid. He doesn't know that. And that's why this stuff is so dangerous to protecting the innocence of kids. And the response that I've gotten to this has been very telling. The number of people commenting on that New York Times piece, the number of people on my social media saying, "You're a Karen. You're the Scrooge of Halloween. Just tell your kid to look the other way." Karen used to be a phrase that just meant a middle-aged woman freaking out over a minor nuisance in her life. Now it's this catch-all phrase. Anyone in society who wants to protect certain basic cultural norms, they are a Karen. Anyone in society who wants to protect the innocence of little kids, they are a Karen. So in this case, I'm happy to be labeled a Karen if it means ignoring the requests of weirdos who want to traumatize little kids with violent displays in their front yards. I am happy to be a Karen standing with my fellow Karens in the bastion of normalcy when it comes to defending Halloween. And to the people that want to partake in the weird, gory, creepy, demonic stuff, all we're asking as parents, all we're asking as normal Americans is that you do it behind closed doors. Go buy a movie ticket and see a horror movie. Go buy a ticket to a haunted house and partake in all of that stuff you want. Don't put it in your yard. There's a reason that if a guy wanted to celebrate Halloween by putting up a giant display of a topless witch in his yard, you'd say, no, you can't do that. That crosses the line. That's indecent. We're not going to allow you to put this nudity in your front yard for little kids to see. It should be the same thing with this violent stuff. And I'll end on this here. I think a big reason we're seeing this type of stuff happen is, number one, that people they like revel in exposing little kids to things they shouldn't see. They take sadistic pleasure in it. It's why we see kids being dragged to these, drag time story hours at libraries. It's why we see kids getting dragged to these crazy pride parades. There are a certain sect of society that takes pleasure in exposing kids to things and stripping their innocence from them. And second, there is this growing number of adults who want to prolong their adolescence as long as possible and take things meant for kids and make them for adults. That's why you see so many like Disney adults who would like, no, Disney World is not actually for kids. It's for adults. And you need to accommodate me here. They're now doing that with Halloween, saying Halloween, it's not for little kids. It's just as much for adults, when we all know trick-or-treating and Halloween, it is for little kids. Adults can take part. At its core, it's for little kids. And I'm just trying to defend it. Ben, I got to get your take. Am I being a Karen here? Am I over the top for being offended?
No, I mean, I totally agree with
displays?
this. I have 4 kids, all of whom are under the age of 12. And when we walk around the neighborhood, and we live where there's an HOA that's pretty strict about what you can display outside your house, but we've been in neighborhoods where that is not the case. And yeah, I mean, there are people who are putting out egregious stuff. And frankly, I do think that I have a right to walk down the street with my children without having to be confronted with gory, hideous images where I have to shield my children's eyes. And I don't think that that's a crazy statement. The stuff that happens in the public sphere actually affects everybody. And pretending that public and private, that distinction needs to go away because of the feelings of adults who wish to act like rowdy teenagers is really silly to me. So, Cabot, I congratulate you on being yet another Gen Z 80-year-old. That's exciting stuff. Cabot, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ben.
Well, joining us online is my friend Andrew Klavan, the host of The Andrew Klavan Show and author of After That, The Dark, which is his brand new book. It's around here somewhere. Guys, I don't know where you put... Do you have one, Klavan? Hold it up. Hold up your book. It's behind you. Okay, fine. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, and we just have to do this stuff on the fly. It is his latest book. It is his Cameron Winter Mysteries. This is the 5th book in that series. And like all of them, it is a fantastic read. So, Drew, what was the sort of angle that drove you to write this particular book?
Well, this guy has been looking for love through the whole series. He's a former assassin. Kind of the things he's done weigh really heavy on him, and he doesn't feel he's worthy of love. So here's this guy who has incredible courage when it comes to danger, who's been trying to work up the courage to call this woman that he understands from at first sight is going to be somebody he is really connected to. And he finally takes her out on a date, and she knows that he likes to go around solving murder mysteries. So she tells him a true story about a locked room mystery, and he goes out to solve it just to impress her. And he finds that he stumbles into this incredible nationwide conspiracy that puts him in danger, puts this girl he's falling in love with in danger. And he realizes everything he's done to try and stop being an assassin has failed, because now he has to go and kill people to keep her safe and to stop these people. So it's kind of it's a locked room mystery. It's a thriller, and it's a love story. And I think it's just as good as anything I've written. I'm just so proud of it and pleased with it. I want everybody to take a look, because I really do think they're going to love it.
So, Drew, one of the things that's sort of fascinating about your books, and I've read a bunch of your books, actually, which I don't like to admit publicly because, you might get us well ahead, and we wouldn't want that to happen. But I've read a lot of your books. One of the things that you do when you write your books is you write not just, great plots and great characters, but thematically. There's always a lot of sort of symbolic thematics and important issues and even spiritual issues that you sort of bring up in your books. What were the ones that drove this one?
Well, I think the whole Cameron Winter ethos is, how does a man who's been an anti-hero turn himself into a hero? I mean, one of the things I've seen in the culture for the last 20 years is that the role of men has become completely murky on TV, and the great moments of TV, which were around the 2000s, early 2000s, all you saw were anti-heroes. You saw The Sopranos and you saw Breaking Bad, you saw The Shield, The Wire. Every guy was a good guy, but also a bad guy at the same time, or he was manly, but he was a bad man. And so Cameron Winter has been that bad man. And suddenly he thinks, wait a minute, maybe there's some other way to be a man. So it's this transitional thing. It's a real struggle because men have to do dangerous things. They have to do wicked things. They have to be able to do nasty, dangerous things in order to be good people, but they also have to not be able to do those things. And that's the kind of thing he's wrestling with. When is it right to pull the trigger? When isn't it? And to me, I consider myself, I probably shouldn't say it, but I consider myself one of the best action writers in the country. However, action doesn't mean anything to me unless it's about the characters involved. So everything that happens in these books is really a way of exploring character and exploring character in the culture of the moment, which is obviously in a low point and trying to climb up out of it. And I believe it will, but I think it has to be led by men who figure out what it is to be a good man.
Yeah, and Drew, one of the things that I think conservatives tend to overlook very often, because conservatives are business focused or they're religion focused or they're fact focused, when they sit down and they sort of watch what they want to watch on TV, they tend to watch whatever is sort of available. It's like they turn off that part of their brain. And then when you, as a conservative, say, you ought to read this type of fiction because this sort of fiction is actually good and promotes your values, then you kind of see the eyes glaze over very often with conservatives. Like, that's not how I view entertainment, or why shouldn't I spend my money on the latest nonfiction book? So, for conservatives, I think it's valuable to understand why fiction is actually a really important medium, maybe a more important medium than nonfiction for most people.
Yeah, it's the most intimate cultural artifact there is. It's a complete direct connection between creator and the reader. And the other thing is, there are two things going on at once. One is the publishing business, except for my publisher, has been taken over by women, and they don't produce things that men want to read. So they say, well, men don't want to read novels. But every time I write a novel, men want to read it. And when I was asked by Thomas Nelson to write books for boys, they said, we can't get boys to read. And I said, of course, look around the room. You're all women. You don't know what boys want to read. And when I wrote action novels for boys, they really sold well. They sold very quickly and a lot of copies. And so I think that's one thing, that men have been sort of struck out of the arts. But the other thing is conservatives do have this prejudice where they think, why am I reading this? It's not true. There are like two people that I talk to in the conservative movement who really appreciate fiction. You're one and Glenn Beck is the other one. And they're the two people who get it, that this is an important thing. And the reason it's important is because it adds perspectives to your mind. You don't have to agree with those perspectives. You just have to be able to experience them so you understand what other people are doing. You read enough and you start to look at the culture and get what's going on beneath the surface, because so often conservatives look for practical causes, financial causes, economic causes, political causes. All those things are real, but you're also dealing with human nature. And you do not know what finances, economics, and politics will do if you don't understand human nature. You can only get that understanding from the arts, from an engagement with the arts. And I think the conservative movement would really benefit in not only each individual, but the movement itself would benefit from a real engagement with creativity in the arts.
Well, the book is After That in the Dark by our friend Andrew Klavan. Check out his show, The Andrew Klavan Show, as well over at Daily Wire Plus. And I believe that there are signed copies of your book, After That in the Dark, in the Daily Wire shop. So people can go check it out over there as well if you are desperately in need of a cultural artifact that soon will be worth more on eBay because, as we all know, after people plot, the prices go up. So the supply, stops. So
that's it.
I'd be
one of my books is now selling for like $2,000.
Yeah, exactly. I can't go through an interview with Drew without making a joke about his impending death. Drew, I appreciate the time. Good to see you, dude.
Always great to see you. Bye.
Artie, coming up, we'll jump into the latest on the economy because, again, some mixed signals. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.